Hey everybody, this is AfterThoughts, talking a little bit about the sermon that was just given. Nick preached on 1 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 16, and so we're just sharing some ideas and some things as I was listening, and this is a passage on Paul's pointing out began his labor and toil night and day, if I can remember, because that was a big point, and connection with, particularly as we as a church, and just it's worth pointing out. One thing I was thinking while you were sharing is that it was very positive, but not like sometimes when I'm see, I guess I confess this. There have been times where I have like praised a church, but it's very strained praise. Like like I'm and you're looking for those things to
Like looking for the good, yeah.
yeah, like hey, we did this event and nobody died, yay, so um, but there's just genuine good that we're part of it. I think sometimes we forget what we're really doing.
Right.
And our mission, our purpose, because Stacy and I have been talking about that lately, is that it's really easy as a church to drift and you forget why you're doing what you're doing. And that this is not just a hamster wheel of ministry. We have purpose, we have direction, and it should be fueled by that love. And I think sometimes we can forget that. So I think it was a good reminder. One thing I'd written down, because when you started off and you start talking about the average salaries, and I just thought to myself also, because if I think I've shared this story before where when I was a senior in high school and I was considering ministry, I had a book that gave the average salaries of pastors, and it was super low. And I remember saying, we're going to turn that page, and that's why I didn't go into ministry right after high school.
Right.
That God called me to ministry probably about 2-3 years later, and I realized about almost missed the call. But that was it. It was because the average salary back in that day was like 20, 25, 27, something like that. Okay, like average. Among all pastors, and the average for SBC was like 76, so
Yeah,
that's
76,
a
yep.
significant difference.
Well,
But
I don't know how big of a difference it actually is, because when you were 18, I mean, that was 60 years ago.
It's still. But anyway, we're the same age, so I wouldn't be careful. And you're slightly older, but anyway. So
Well, it's darn near 30 years ago.
focusing on you talked about the salaries, you talked about the bivocational, and I think it's worth important. Like, this is the time to really bring out and highlight in pastoral world. Like, I know you're mentioning this, and people, they sort of, okay, I can see that. In the pastoral world, I don't think people realize how bad this is.
Oh, no, I am absolutely. I mean, I can't even. I hate telling people I don't get paid. Like, I hate it.
Or even just bivocational.
I don't like telling people either.
You're not a real pastor.
When it comes to people, not in our church, but outside of our church, I don't tell people that because I know in their mind it automatically, like, they automatically go, "Oh, you're not a real pastor." But with other pastors, for a fact, I am not worthy to be in their presence.
It's even worse if you're like a family pastor, because then, especially, I was 30 years old working. I was doing remediation in the school system, and one of the church members came in, and again, 30 years old, full-time associate pastor of youth, and was asked, when did I plan on becoming a real pastor? Like, straight up.
It's nuts to me.
Almost to the level of, what do you want to, are you going to do this when you grow up, kind of thing. So.
And then you read about Paul is making tents just so that he can, push through the ministry. He doesn't have to. They would easily give him money.
I made several of those points that he was, in a sense, volunteer, like you said. He didn't take those salaries. And no one would blink an eye at Paul and be like, no, he wasn't legit. But again, when we do this...
God forbid I build some houses to make ends meet. And now I'm like, all of a sudden...
Yeah. So on that note, again, we could that's a personal soapbox.
I don't like talking about it. So bringing it up, it was like, I felt like it's okay because Paul talks about it, but I really don't like talking about it.
But there's this element, though, I think people in the congregation don't understand, like, not having, when you're not in that world, like, there's some element, I've always related, when you're in a certain business or in a certain field, you tend to have these hierarchy, comparisons, tribalism, those kinds of things. Educators do that with their schools and their school systems. And among pastors, it's weird because it happens among pastors, but then it just happens with the whole congregation as well, that they don't look at us, and it's, so aside from that, I think, piggyback on it though, the view of volunteers in general, because I think that when we look at the church and we're utilizing volunteer help, I think two things, and this is again I started writing all this stuff down. My mind just started pinging off all this. Volunteers themselves have a very low view of themselves. They'll say, well, I'm just a volunteer. What do I do? It doesn't matter, and
Right.
there's you don't really get that ownership. You don't get that buy-in. You get, because people do, they'll almost use that, but I'm just a volunteer.
Yes. Well, they do use it not only for low view of themselves, but they use it as an excuse that can't be held accountable for anything either sometimes, because
Right.
You're not paying me for this. I can do what I want, type of deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and that you get like you lose the sense of excellence, and that's why I think in our world, particularly our corporate pragmatic world, you pay people a lot of money so that way you get excellence of work.
Right.
And there's this equation. Well, if I'm not getting paid a lot of money, there's no need to do excellent work. And we talk about virtue and vices all the time. That's a vice we've trained in ourselves. And I think this is what I see in churches. There's no real sense of that buy-in, that ownership, that, even now, like teaching the little kids Sunday school, like that room, I view it almost like it's kind of like my domain. Like I have a responsibility, this room. Like I look at it, I'm like, okay, now it's a shared room. So, and I have to deal with some of these things, but there's this sense of, I desire this to be good. I desire this to be useful. I want this, and again, it's a little kid Sunday school, which in church ministry work, that's almost like bottom of the totem pole. It's like, we'll throw somebody in there. So I get, people are shocked.
No, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
that level right there. When I tell them I'm a family pastor, I tell them, I got like the little kid Sunday school, people are like, what'd you do wrong? Like, they think you're punishing me for being teaching the little
There's
kids.
a lot of that lately.
So
well, it's because you left and went and preached in another church. That's why.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
inside stuff. Sorry.
anyway,
yeah, but can you imagine? Can you imagine them looking at Paul, Timothy, and Silvanus, or I don't know how to say his name, but looking at them and treating them the same way because they're volunteers? Like they're literally working night and day, work and toil, so that they can serve in this way. Like what? Like nobody would treat them that way. But what an amazing life to be able to have, to be able to unburden from everybody else and just preach the gospel.
I feel like, thinking about it this way, when you think of Paul being a tent maker, when people ask, like in your case, it's like, well, he's a bivocational pastor, but his real job is contracting. I guess that's the right word. Okay, so he's really a contractor, but he does some pastoring. Would we treat Paul? Well, he's really just a tent maker, but he does a little, church planting on the side.
Little pastoring on the side. Church
anyway, but I think
little missionary work.
Taking it back to the volunteers of the church, I think that's the mindset that just has to be shifted, and it takes so long to do that, to have that sense of labor and toil as a volunteer. Like, again, we have that mindset of, in the corporate world, I'm not paid to do it, so it's not going to happen.
Right.
And I understand that in terms of business and corporate, but there is also this element within ministry, like, this is our home church. This is our church family. Like, we give our families at home. Nobody pays me to be the dad. Nobody pays Stacy to be the mom. But we own that, and we strive to grow. We strive to fulfill that role well, and even in some ways to not overstep. We're mindful not to overstep our boundaries, or to do, like with my children. If I need to pull back, and let them go, to really operate with wisdom. We lack that. I think, not just saying like Cape Fear, but I'm saying like churches in general. I've never really seen a good example. There's not a case where I could hold up and say, here's an example where you have the volunteers who are all bought in, so it's a struggle.
I think we're getting there. Like, I mean, as a church, we're moving in that direction, I think. And we're not there, but we're moving in that direction for sure.
Right.
And the fact I got to do a sermon and just be like, love you guys. You guys are doing so good. Like, I just loved it. I mean, it was a fun sermon to preach.
And it is, and it was funny you mentioned, that we're not the same church we were like 6 years ago, and we sort of got some rather hearty amens.
Yeah.
Churches, they change over time, and I've told people that so many times. It's a far cry from what it was 7 years ago when I came, over 7 years ago, that for to see like where we are and to not lose sight of where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why also we're like, well, we get things functional and just let it ride
Well,
until we die.
that's
No,
where
no.
the leadership has to do what leadership does and has to try to maintain that vision.
Hmm. So you also mentioned there was a phrase, I don't know if you said it or not, but I wrote this down, the handcuffing of the American pastor. At least you were talking in that
vein.
in
Yeah.
that
I don't
vein.
remember if I said it, but yeah.
But I liked it because I'm just like, ooh, there's another book I'll never write. But because it's such an evocative title because I've experienced that
Mm-hmm.
where you literally can't. And I've also experienced because you mentioned the fear like when everything's tied up, because I was one of those pastors that my home, everything was tied up. And I was having some extreme problems. And I remember one time just sort of mentioning some of these things, and I ended up getting rebuked by other ministers. Oh, you should never fear. You're a terrible pastor because you're worried about your family eating. And I'm like, that's a legitimate concern. Like, this is my responsibility. I mean,
Yeah.
I have that sense God will take care of my family, but I also don't want to do something stupid. And
I don't want it to come across like, I mean, because we have scripture that even says it's okay to make your living from this. Like, that's
right,
okay. Like,
yes.
I don't want it to come across that way. It's just the freedom we experience from not being there.
And I told you Levi was chatting with me before, and he even said, he's like, I still kind of find it weird that people get paid to be a pastor. He said that this morning driving into church, and I was like, what is that? Why is it? He's like, well, why do that? And I made the comment, well, when I was working full time, I'm completely available. Something happens, somebody goes into the hospital up in Raleigh, I'm off and going to Raleigh. If you're doing a job and you've got all these other responsibilities,
Right, yeah.
you got to plan around all that. And he was like, oh, okay, that made sense. So, he was fine. But that's not the only time. I would say in the last couple of months, I've encountered several people who are not only shocked that we get paid, but that you'd actually have to go to school for it.
Mm.
I've had a couple of those conversations recently, and I look at that and I was like, why wouldn't you get trained, especially in the world we live in where training is so essentially easy to come by?
Yeah.
Even in formal training.
Well, I know two pastors that did not go to any formal training, and they're excellent pastors.
Right.
So, but they absolutely were trained, studied.
But there's a training that goes on,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm saying, that's why even with just lay training, you can be, if you're properly discipled, you can make an excellent pastor.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we often don't have. And that's why a lot of people, even at the Bible college, end up there because they can't find discipleship
Right.
anywhere else.
Well, that's kind of why I landed there.
Yeah, there was you, several people, as new believers. We've had several people who are new believers come in because they want to learn and they have no idea where to turn to.
That's good.
So I think that's an indictment in many ways to the church that we're not doing what we're supposed to do.
I talk about discipleship on a regular.
So that becomes an issue. But last couple things, because you were talking about. I put this note because you'd gone into the issue of the father and the example there, and you had said something that sparked this, and I just wrote down, sometimes we get caught up in the bad. Sometimes all we see is the toil and the labor and not the love. And again, not exactly what you said, but again, these are the thoughts we share afterwards.
That's what this is about, yeah.
That I think for me, I think that resonated more with me. That's where I was, where we tend to do that. We tend to get because that's kind of the way I've been lately. Like I'm fatigued. I'm just like, it's one thing after another. You got to keep going, and you get so wrapped up, and you forget all the good. You forget to enjoy the good and the fruits of the labor.
Well, I think one of the things we were just talking about a second ago is before we started recording was the idea of excellence and I don't know. Did we talk about it? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But doing things with excellence, sometimes we get so caught up in the excellence that we always see where we fall short.
Right.
And that's kind of,
same thing.
And it's the same thing. Is like if we're focused on the wrong thing, then we constantly miss out on the peace and the joy and the love that comes with this life. Like,
it's like there's some guys I know, some high schoolers that are competitive gymnasts, and they do amazing things. And when you talk about like, wow, that was incredible, they will highlight every little thing they did wrong. Like, no, I could have shaved this, I could have done this, I could have, you know, they don't see that good. And I think we need to find as churches that middle ground where we're able to enjoy and recognize the good, but recognize the goal is still unmet, that we're all
still
moving
pursue
that
it.
direction. And I think
Right.
that really in many ways becomes Paul's example. He's like, you saw us, you know what we're doing, you've joined us, good job. And I think in many ways for the church, that's kind of where we were, and particularly you were today, that, hey, we've done a lot. We've come a long way. And let's keep striving.
Yeah.
The Lord's not done with us yet.
I'm excited. I mean, that was a fun one to preach, and I'm just super proud to be a part of this church, and blessed that God's allowed me to be a part of all this. Like, it's so much fun.
Yep. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll catch you guys next time.